So here's the deal, I'm taking over your inheritance. If you've got a problem with that, we can just get divorced and you can disappear. Your father always said it right, you can't do anything, that's why he's got you doing odd jobs at the subsidiary. Tough luck for you. Steve said this and mentioned about divorce. All right. Thinking I would be against the divorce, Steve looked somewhat taken aback when I agreed readily. No more business dealings. With that, I left the company. A male colleague chased after me with a pale face. However, I didn't look back and got into my car. Steve, you married me just for my dad's money, you truly are a greedy soul. I was foolish not to see through you, but you, who would disgrace our family and wait for a person to pass just for money, are even more foolish. I feel a bit sorry for you, but for someone who has lost their human heart, there is no room for sympathy. I will definitely send you to hell. I will never forgive you. My name is Jennifer Atwood, and I just celebrated my 42nd birthday last week. I met my husband Steve in the last year of my 30s and got married. I loved my job and always thought I'd be fine on my own, but fate led me to marry him. The one who introduced him to me was none other than my dad. My dad loved drinking, and after work, he would go out every night to drink. Drinking stylishly seemed to be his creed, and he would always head out dressed in chic outfits. He was particular about paying in cash rather than using cards. No matter how much he drank, he was never overwhelmed by alcohol, and he could drink until morning without it affecting him. Getting drunk is okay, but then you miss out on the true taste of the liquor. He would say and start talking about what makes alcohol taste good. For me, who can't drink, his stories sound like an alien language. Yet, he would always tell me, you should find yourself a husband who can drink. And the husband he caught for me was Steve. Steve used to come as a customer to the bar where my dad frequently went. He was a corporate employee in his late 30s like me, working in sales. By chance, they sat close to each other and hit it off as they talked. My dad treated Steve to some drinks, and after meeting a few times at the bar, they started talking about me. I once asked Steve what my dad had told him about me. He said he had a daughter who used to model. She even aimed to be an actress, so she missed her chance to marry. But she's good at cooking and sewing. She's charming like him, so he wants me to meet her. I actually thought I got fooled by him. I was told and so embarrassed, could feel my face burning. The modeling he referred to must have been when I modeled for a supermarket flyer as a child. And just because I was in the drama club during my student years, he made it sound like I had been aiming to become an actress. As for cooking and sewing, I'm just average, but being from a single-father home, I had to do it out of necessity. I didn't lie, I just exaggerated a bit. My father would say with a nonchalant expression whenever I complained. That's just how he always is. Easygoing and good-natured. Despite being an older man, he had many friends. Eventually, due to the unusually good relationship between my father and Steve, we ended up getting married. Steve was kind to both my dad and me. He was rich in conversation and knew how to win people over. My dad would say, he's just like I was when I was young, a cliché but true statement. As painful as it is to admit, that may have been why I developed a liking for Steve. Steve seemed happy to have become my dad's son-in-law. The fact that my dad was the president of a company was probably one of the attractions. But more than that, they strangely hit it off. As for me, I was like an extra to my dad. Still, thought marrying Steve, who was kind and inclusive, was the greatest happiness for me. Looking back now, I should have been more cautious about choosing a spouse. Who could have imagined that this marriage, brought about by my dad, would turn into such hellish suffering? I never expected that my dad, who always had a way of stirring things up, would influence my marriage as well. It was about a year after Steve and I got married that my dad fell ill and was hospitalized. He always loved his drink, and it seemed his liver, which he had taxed since his youth, was now screaming for mercy. Dr. Connor, who is my dad's primary care doctor, and I had advised him to stop drinking alcohol. As a result, he was sulking on his hospital bed. Alcohol is the medicine of life. What do I have to live for now? He would complain daily. However, once he was allowed to walk around the hospital, he quickly made many friends there with his usual affability, which was surprising. He seemed to enjoy chatting in the playroom for a few minutes each day. I was relieved to see that my dad had found some joy. "How's your father doing?" Whenever I returned from visiting my dad, Steve would always ask this. Thinking Steve was also worried about him, I made it a point to describe my dad's condition in detail. When I visited the hospital last week, he was connected to tubes and needed to rest. But this week, since he's been doing better, I told Steve that he could now walk around the hospital. I thought Steve would be relieved, but his reaction was unexpected. "Huh, he can walk now? That's too bad." I doubted my ears. What did he mean by that? His comment could be taken as if he wasn't happy about my dad's recovery, so I asked, "Too bad?" Then he said, "Oh. I meant that I wanted to take care of your dad when he couldn't move. I wanted to be there for him, that's all. It's great that he can walk now, really." "Oh, but hey." Steve quickly changed the subject to talk about his work. He seemed a bit flustered but continued. "Our company just landed a major contract thanks to my efforts. It was a tough one to secure. Something about the other party having high hopes for my future, so they went ahead with the contract. And it's across multiple lines too. So my performance is really soaring." It was unusual for him to talk about his work with such confidence. He usually seemed more humble about his work. It must have been a contract he really wanted. "Well, it's a complicated story for you who doesn't do much important work." "Sorry, no offense intended, don't worry about it," Steve said and went back to his room. I felt a slight discomfort with his words but decided not to dwell on it since he said he meant nothing by it. In the first year of our marriage, he had always been kind. He was capable at work, and people often said he was the ideal husband. He never frowned even if I came home later than him. Before my dad was hospitalized, he would often visit my dad's house to keep him company. Now, he even helps clean the living room and bathroom at home. Steve said, "I like cleaning. It's nicer for you when you come home to clean rooms and bathroom, right?" In return, he asked me always to let him know when I would be finishing work. He needed to know so he could start cleaning at the right time. Typical of the conscientious Steve, I had to laugh a little. Such a kind Steve couldn't possibly find my father's recovery unfortunate. It must have been, as Steve said, that he wanted to be supportive. I convinced myself and started preparing for work the next day. A few days later, I received a call from the hospital. My father's condition had worsened. I left work and headed to the hospital where he was staying. In the hospital room, he was connected to several tubes, his eyes closed. I tried to take the fact that he was connected to tubes as a good sign and composed myself. Dr. Connor explained the situation, and I realized that I needed to be prepared for the near future. Should I contact my mother? When I was in high school, my parents got divorced. I heard that the reason for their divorce was that she could no longer keep up with his overly free-spirited nature. However, because he couldn't do anything on his own, I was taken in by him. Already being in high school, I decided on my own to stay with him, and I am grateful to him for funding my college education. That's why I was working hard at my job now, to repay him for his kindness. But he doesn't have much time left. I'm sure that if I were my mother, I would want to be contacted. I decided that I would send a message to her when I got home. First, I returned to the office to finish the work I had left undone, and then I went home. Although I hadn't come to terms with my feelings yet, thought that talking to my mother and Steve might help me settle down. Steve was in the living room. Perhaps because I had told him I would be coming home early, the room hadn't been cleaned. Since he usually does the cleaning, I thought I would do it today, but as I was thinking this, spoke to Steve who was using his phone on the sofa. Today, I was called out from work by the hospital. "It's about Dad." Before I could finish, he threw his phone on the sofa, turned to me with energy, and said with a smile, "Did your father finally pass away?" I was so overwhelmed by his forcefulness that I couldn't reply immediately. Then, for some reason, he continued talking on his own. Right. He wasn't well before he was hospitalized. It must be tough for you, Jennifer, but don't worry, I'm here. Things like managing the company and finances are too difficult for you who lacks education and culture, right? So, although his speech was still midway, I interrupted him realizing the huge misunderstanding. Steve. It's okay, everything's okay. Dad's still alive. Thank you for all your concern, I said. Upon hearing this, he stopped moving and displayed a noticeably disappointed expression. I couldn't understand why he would make such a face. He seemed to care about my dad's company and finances, but in the event of an emergency, I planned to consult the appropriate professionals. My dad has always strongly advised me not to discuss the management details with anyone close, even if they are family. Since Steve is just a salesperson at a company, my dad and I have not shared the specifics of our company with him. Perhaps sensing the situation, Steve had never asked us about it. Seeing Steve still looking disappointed, informed him about my dad's condition. So, it's a situation where we need to be prepared. Could you visit Dad soon, Steve? Then he looked up slightly, smiled gently at me, and stood up from the sofa. Understood. I'll go if I can, he said and went back to his room. His words echoed in my mind. In the adult world, I'll go if I can often equals I won't go. I silently watched as Steve walked away. My dad passed away 2 weeks later. The decline from his illness to his death felt incredibly fast. By the time his liver started screaming, it was already too late. During those 2 weeks, I stayed at the hospital overnight to keep an eye on his condition. Although he was connected to tubes until the end, it seemed he passed away without much suffering. During the last 2 weeks, many people who had been close to him came to visit his hospital room. Drinking buddies, old friends, and daily visits from people from my dad's and my company's. Even patients who had become his friends in the hospital came to his room to talk to my dad, who remained asleep. It was a 2-week period during which I truly felt that my dad was loved by many. However, despite the many visitors, Steve never once came to visit my dad. Though I had some expectation from his tone, I was utterly dismayed that he, having been so cherished by my dad, showed such callous disregard. I thought of asking Steve to help with the funeral arrangements, but I couldn't get in touch with him. When I contacted his company, they said he had taken bereavement leave. Yet he did not return home, and, ultimately, he did not show up at the funeral either. Although people from Steve's company came to offer their condolences, they were understandably puzzled by his absence. I was so busy after my dad passed away that I didn't even have time to cry. I felt guilty but had to ask my mom to help sort through the tedious paperwork. It was 10 days after my dad's death before I could finally settle down at home. During that time, couldn't get in touch with Steve at all. I was so worried he might have been in an accident. However, when I got home and saw him in the living room, I felt a bit relieved. Steve, what happened? You didn't come to the hospital, you weren't at home, and I couldn't reach you. Dad passed away, you know. Steve, who was still fiddling with his phone on the sofa, said without looking at me. Yeah, I know. It took longer than I thought since he collapsed. I was getting irritated, wondering how long he would make me wait. I couldn't understand his words. He must have known about my dad's death since he had applied for bereavement leave at work. So why hadn't he shown up at the hospital or the funeral? Despite any circumstances, I felt intense anger at his current comments. We've been married for a year. No, even before that, my dad treated you well, right? Why would you repay his kindness with such betrayal? At that moment, I felt tears about to come for the first time since his death. But I refused to let myself cry over such a thing, and I forced back the tears. What? Kindness? What are you talking about? It's the other way around. I married someone like you who can't do anything. If anything, I should be the one thanked by your father. You say I should come to the funeral, but if you needed me, you should have come to me. He burst into carefree laughter while still looking at his phone screen. Was this the kind Steve I knew? Was my belief that he adored my dad just an illusion? When I met him at the bar, another customer said, "That man is the president," so I approached him and buttered him up a bit. Then he started treating me nicely, and I thought, this guy is useful. My dad was pleased to have found Steve. He was genuinely happy, as if he had gained a son. Man, this past year has been torture. I had to be nice to you and suck up to your father, right? I couldn't have kept my motivation if I wasn't expecting some inheritance to come my way eventually. But I didn't expect him to fall ill so soon. Guess that was a stroke of luck. The kind Steve was indeed an illusion. I was so shocked that I couldn't move or speak. The tears I had been holding back flowed ceaselessly. So, I'll be managing your inheritance. If you have a problem with that, get divorced and disappear. But you can't actually divorce, can you? You can't do anything, right? Even your job is just menial, isn't it? Your father used to say so. You're only good for odd jobs at the subsidiary. Tough luck, huh? He laughed loudly. My tears had completely stopped, replaced now only by anger. Who was this person in front of me? Surely, he must be some kind of demon that feeds on the kindness of others. Without saying anything, I went back to my own bedroom. Even after I closed the door, I could still hear his annoying laughter. With my hands pressed against my ears, I firmly resolved in my angered heart. Steve, I will never forgive you. Dad once said Steve was just like my dad when he was young, but Steve is nothing like Dad. Although my dad might have exaggerated at times, he never lied. Steve, you married me solely for my dad's wealth. You really are a money-grubbing fiend. I was foolish not to see through you, but you, who disgraced our family and waited for someone to die for money, are even more foolish. I feel slightly sorry for you, but there is no room for sympathy for someone who has lost their humanity. I will definitely send you in hell. I will never forgive you. After that, I moved in with my mom because I couldn't stand to face Steve. Today is my day off, so my mom and I ordered lunch and ate together. We're having coffee after the meal. Even though I worry about troubling her, I'm telling her everything that happened. It's so embarrassing that even after living with him for a year, I didn't realize Steve's true nature, not to mention when we first met. Dad was deceived by him until the very end. It's so sad. Upon hearing my words, she sipped her coffee and murmured thoughtfully. I don't think he would pass away without leaving something behind, you know? I didn't fully understand what she was suggesting, but after all, they had been married for nearly 20 years. I decided to listen carefully to her words. Even so, Dad actually told Steve that I was just doing menial work at the company. Isn't that awful? He took it to heart and scorned me for it. Indeed, the work I do might seem menial to some. However, I take pride and dedication in my work. The thought of Steve's contemptuous face flashed through my mind. That was your father's way of protecting you, dear. You know the deal, right? Even among close relations. He promised not to divulge the details of the work. Indeed, as she said, now that seemed oddly convenient. After all, Steve doesn't really know what my actual work entails. And, you know, I might have told you that we divorced because I couldn't keep up with his overly free spirit. But there was actually another reason. Perhaps because I looked eager to know more, she discreetly shared the real reason with me. It was surprising yet fitting of my dad. Once again, I was reminded of the unconventional life he had led. And her story didn't end there. That's why, I believe he definitely left a will. By the way, I received a call from his lawyer, Matthew. He wanted to gather all the relevant parties together. Mom, you really know everything about Dad. I admire that. I said, and she laughed cheerfully. What are you talking about? I'm just his long-divorced wife who knows nothing. I had spent more time with Dad than Mom had. Yet, she seemed to understand him better than I did. I was profoundly impressed by the depth of their relationship as a married couple. My brief, superficial marital relationship with Steve paled in comparison. With a wry smile, she gave me one more piece of advice. Jennifer, remember your father's actions well. He loved surprises, so he must have left something else behind. Encouraged by her words, I started to recall his behavior. He truly was carefree, loved his liquor, and enjoyed surprising people. When I graduated high school, he had secretly filmed me crying. He showed that video on my birthday in front of friends who had come over, much to my embarrassment. It was a terrible crying face. Now, it's a fond memory. Dad was always on the lookout to capture good footage on the sly. I had learned how to dodge his camera, but how long had he continued his covert filming? Suddenly, an idea struck me, and I decided to return home. I also needed to discuss the matter of the will with Steve. Mom, I'm going back home for a bit. Thanks. After thanking her, I rushed towards my house. Upon arriving, I found Steve in the living room. Seeing my face, he stood up in a fluster. Whoa. Why are you back all of a sudden? Don't come back. What a way to be greeted. Despite our faltering marriage, this was still my home. There's no reason for me to be unwelcome in my own house. What do you mean? I came because I have something to discuss today. As I moved to sit on the sofa, Steve seemed to hide something there and warned me, don't come over here. Preferring to keep my distance from him, I decided to speak from afar. What's this talk about? Just so you know, we're not getting divorced yet. Any inheritance that comes your way, I'll be managing it. I sighed, yet I began to discuss the matter regarding the inheritance that Steve was eagerly anticipating. I got a call from Matthew, the lawyer, asking for all relevant parties to gather. There might be a will. So, Steve, you should attend too. Listening to my words, his eyes lit up. Ah, that's great. The scent of money is getting stronger. Okay, I'll definitely participate and make sure to keep an eye on where the money goes. As expected, he was in high mood. In the meantime, I wandered around looking for something particular. It was modestly placed next to a potted plant by the window. After retrieving the item I was looking for, I decided to return to my mother's house, as I had no more business at my own home. Women's shoes were lined up at the entrance, just as when I had entered. The kind I would never wear, heels and pumps. Steve is always sloppy. I muttered to myself as I left the house. At the court, where Matthew had called us to gather, there were 5 of us. My uncle Samuel and his wife, my mother, myself, and Steve. Samuel had no children. I half expected some dramatic revelation like a secret child of my dad's to appear, but such twists are rare in real life. Today's meeting was indeed about his will. Dad had entrusted his will to his personal lawyer, Matthew. The contents of the will, once opened, were as follows. My dad's successor in the company would be Samuel, his cherished collections at home were left to me, his daughter. And the rest of the estate was to be inherited by Steve, who was currently my husband. The details were more complex, but that was the gist of my understanding. Steve, indiscreetly, gave a fist pump right in the courtroom. Haha. How about that, Jennifer? Looks like your dad really liked me. This is more than I expected. All that bootlicking paid off. Samuel, his wife, and my mother all looked appalled by his disgraceful behavior. I felt deeply embarrassed that this man was technically still my husband. At that moment, I felt a strong desire to get a divorce as soon as possible. Steve rapidly signed the prepared documents. I wondered if he really understood what he was signing. I'm not going to read all this fine print. As long as I get the inheritance, that's all that matters. The old man gets company, huh? You get the junk, and I get the assets. I can't stop laughing. Everyone else in the room asked Steve if he was truly okay with the inheritance as it was laid out. Matthew tried to explain the details of the inheritance, but Steve wouldn't listen properly. Eventually, he said, yeah, I get it. Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. By the way, I'm taking the $1,000 that was left in your dad's wallet. After signing the documents, Steve happily went off somewhere. Such a foolish man. Ignoring advice never leads to anything good. I visited my home the next day to confirm with him for the last time. Because I visited my home after the discussion of the will, Steve mistakenly thought I was after the inheritance he was to receive. He has already changed the door key. At first, he wouldn't let me in. I had to explain several times that wasn't the case before I could enter. Isn't it normal to think a daughter inheriting junk would come after my money? That kind of a normal only exists in fiction. What I inherited was not junk, but his prized collection. He had cherished it during his lifetime, and I intended to honor his legacy. What are you doing here then? If you're not after the money, I'd like you to leave. I have people coming over. His demeanor was more intimidating than I could have ever imagined from him before. I was impressed he had managed to hide this side of himself for so long. I'll leave soon. I just wanted to check something. I wanted to confirm that he truly understood what he was inheriting. And also, about our future. Of course I'm going to inherit, I'm not changing my mind about that. Stop talking about it. Oh, and since I'm getting money, I don't need you anymore. So, let's get divorced. With that, Steve mentioned about divorce. All right. He seemed to think I would be reluctant to divorce, so when I readily agreed, his face fell flat in surprise. Yet, it seemed he couldn't resist throwing one more barb my way. Just try to scrape by doing menial work or whatever else on your own. It's pathetic, really, how your own father left you nothing. As Steve laughed mockingly, I decided to question him. Steve, you mentioned before that you closed a big deal, saying that they had high expectations for your future. Are you keeping up with the clients properly? I hope you're not just finishing contracts and forgetting about them. Surprised by such a question from me, Steve looked at me with a hint of incredulity. But he quickly twisted his mouth into a sneer and said disdainfully, "Oh, what an unusual question from someone who can't do anything. Has your father's death suddenly sparked an interest in business?" I was used to his disdain by now. However, his next answer would determine my next move. You know nothing, so I'll tell you, winning contracts is all about grabbing them first. Coordination with clients? Why should I bother with that? It's just annoying. What if I communicate too much and the deal falls through? Just as I thought, Steve wasn't conducting business properly. He always talked as if he was actively working at the forefront. Probably, he only acted the part during contract negotiations. Steve had deceived us for a year, this was just another day's work for him. I see. And do you know the name of the company president? Steve seemed irritated by another question. What's with you all of a sudden? The president's name? I don't know it. Knowing it won't win contracts. True, perhaps, but what company would want to deal with a salesman who doesn't even know the president's name? I gave Steve name card of my lawyer. From now, we can proceed with divorce through our lawyer. Bye, then. Steve looked puzzled. Don't ever come back. Well, eventually, it's Steve who will have to leave this house, but until that day, I'll leave him be. Just then, as I was leaving, a young woman entered the house. She looked at me quizzically. I sent her a serene smile, conveying that she shouldn't worry, we would be strangers in just a few minutes. I got into the car waiting on the street. First, to my lawyer please, I said to my driver, signaling there was still work to be done. After witnessing his behavior earlier, I had made up my mind. Steve, if you underestimate the world, or your job, you're going to learn a painful lesson. After I talked to my lawyer, I headed to the business district and had the car stop in front of a building. This was where Steve worked. I had visited several times, always appreciating the modern vibe of the entrance. When a male employee spotted me walking through the entrance, he hurried over, surprised. Ms. Atwood. I was actually planning to visit your company soon. What brings you here today? Are you alone? He was involved in that notable contract. Saving myself the hassle, I simply told him. No more business dealings. With that, I left the company. He followed me out, his face pale with shock. I didn't look back as I got into the car. I would send the details later, but any complaints or grievances should be directed to Steve. I hurried to my mother's house to prepare for the next steps. The barrage of furious calls from Steve started on the Monday after the weekend. Mondays are often filled with meetings, so I couldn't answer the phone. Actually, I have no intention of answering, whether I'm in meetings or not. Come over if you need something, Steve once said, didn't he? I waited for Steve in the president's office for our final confrontation. He's likely been instructed by his boss to come here, unaware that I would be present. Since it was a significant moment, invited my mother, who had supported me through everything, to have a ringside seat. Soon, there was a knock on the door. Ms. Atwood, I've brought Steve. Announced by my secretary, Catherine, as Steve walked in. Ah, excuse me. He muttered, his voice lacking any businesslike vigor. And clearly reluctant. The issue of a no more business dealings must have gotten him a serious scolding from his boss. He likely thought he was being summoned to apologize. Steve, long time no see. You look down. Are you eating well? My greeting probably caught him off guard, his eyes widening in shock. Jennifer? Why are you here? Because this is my office, my workplace. You weren't told in detail due to a promise with my dad. I'm the president of this company. Surprised? He shook his head vigorously, as if refusing to believe the reality in front of him. But the president was supposed to be your father. You were just doing menial work at a subsidiary, what's going on? Seeing his confusion, explained. My dad ran the older, family-inherited company. Recently, we founded this new company together. Dad was too busy with the old company, so he left this one to me. With our brainstorms, we built this company together, and it turned out to be a huge success. Now, this company employs over 9,000 people, all of whom are like family to me. You had a chance to know I was the president. Your company signed a contract with us, and you were in charge, weren't you? It's unheard of for someone in charge not to know the president's name. And not to communicate after signing the contract? That's just unacceptable. Please, have a long talk with the rest of the company about this. This wasn't just a comment as his ex-wife, but as a professional thoroughly disillusioned by Steve's attitude. Steve gritted his teeth in frustration, looking down. Then, looking up, he scoffed, big company or not, I'm disappointed the president is such a useless old lady. I refuse to contract with you. As if Steve had the authority to decide that on his own. Truly, he underestimated his job. As he tried to leave, my assistant stationed at the door pushed him back into the room. Steve, we're not done talking. It seems you've been unfaithful throughout our marriage, haven't you? My words made him flinch, but he quickly tried to regain his composure. That woman you saw me with the other day? I met her after we separated. Our marital relationship was already broken, so you have no complaints. Right? Since Steve seemed to not listen. During our marriage, you had an affair, didn't you? I said it slowly this time. He didn't seem to like the way I said it and shouted back, his face turning red. I did not. You can't just make baseless accusations. It's curious how guilty people always demand proof. So, I decided to provide some. In the collection I inherited from my dad was his diary. I took the liberty of reading it. He meticulously documented this past year. Steve supposedly went out for drinks but ended up at a hotel with a young woman. He thought he'd shaken me off, but never underestimate me. I wonder if I should tell Jennifer. There are things only a married couple can understand. Let's wait and see. I planned to visit Jennifer's house, but saw Steve walking with an unknown woman. Jennifer's working overtime again. Hang in there, Jennifer. As I read excerpts from my dad's diary, Steve clicked his tongue audibly. That's just your father's perspective. It's hardly conclusive proof, is it? Steve remained defiant, refusing to acknowledge the gravity of his actions. If you're really eager for evidence, I'll lay it all out for you. I arranged several photographs on the desk. These showed Steve entering a hotel with a woman. Photography was also one of my dad's hobbies, he always carried a camera with him. These were captured by a camera found among the collection. True to film, they are beautifully clear. And don't worry, it's film. So no tampering possible. Steve snatched the photos from my hand and tore them up on the spot. Seeing no sign of remorse in Steve, I said. Steve, don't you feel anything? Dad knew about your infidelity and kept quiet about it. He believed in you, didn't he? Really? You feel nothing at all? Despite my urgent questioning, all Steve could say was a shut up. I continued, despite feeling pathetic about his response. It seems like Dad eventually gave up on you when you didn't stop your cheating. There was a small camera at home, Dad used to use it for surprises. It was meant to be a prank initially, but it ended up recording unbelievable footage. Dad saw everything. It's likely that Dad had placed several cameras. One of these was not retrieved by him and remained. I collected that one. Steve, it's truly unbelievable. You brought your affair partner into our home, didn't you? It's all recorded by this camera. That's why you insisted inform you when I would be home and why you cleaned the living room and bathroom where you used it for your infidelity. Thanks to Dad, it all makes sense now. Steve scratched his head irritably and slumped into the chair, sulking. I exchanged a nod with my mother. Steve really is unbelievably naive. And why doesn't he listen to anyone? As I had said earlier, Dad had finally written Steve off. I keep saying that your dad wanted to leave the inheritance to me because he thought highly of me. What about the junk you inherited? Was it just meant to expose my infidelity? Ironically, his narcissism is almost enviable here. Yes, according to Steve, Dad wanted to leave him the inheritance. Negative inheritance, that is. Steve, do you remember Dad talking about a joint loan? You only half listened and signed off on it, so you probably forgot. As Steve looked puzzled, my mother started to speak. The reason we divorced was because of his debts. They just kept growing, and he was robbing Peter to pay Paul right up until he died. Never quitting gambling. I think it's a substantial amount. Even then, he didn't seem to understand. I had no choice but to make it clear. Steve, you inherited all the property Dad personally owned. That's not just the assets, but also the debts, including the joint loan. You've already dipped into his money, so you can't disclaim the inheritance now. You have to bear it all. Finally, his complexion changed. It paled rapidly. What? No way. Why should I inherit the old man's debts? That's not valid. I'll renounce it. My dad must have anticipated this reaction. If Steve had really understood and listened to those around him, he would renounce the inheritance immediately. But his greed and failure to verify details led him into this trap. Try renouncing the inheritance if you must. It might give you some peace of mind, though I doubt it'll work. Apparently terrified by the debt, Steve collapsed to his knees, trembling. As sweat streamed down his forehead. Wait, you, Jennifer, you're a president, right? Of this huge company, then you should pay off your old man's debts, right? Why me, why? Steve began to cry loudly. His cries almost like screams. Dad must have regretted introducing such a man to me, knowing his true nature. Steve was the man my dad had introduced to me. Yet, there were times when I thought being married to him was happiness. So, I don't hate my dad for it. The one to blame is Steve, who deceived both my dad and me and turned into a greedy monster. As his health deteriorated, he must have contemplated on his own ways to take revenge on Steve through me. Steve continued to cry. Just then, the phone in the president's office rang. It was connected to reception, and the caller was Steve's boss. I hung up after responding. Steve, you better hurry back to your company. It seems the higher-ups want to talk to you about this issue. Steve, his face paler than ever, seemed to have stopped crying instantly. There you go, I have work to do, so off you go. Goodbye, Steve. I called out to my assistant waiting outside and sent a disoriented Steve back to his office. Hopefully, he makes it back to his company without issue. After the battle, I sat down with my mother in the lounge, soothing myself with some warm coffee. My office is on the 5th floor of a 15-story building. Wanting my employees to enjoy a scenic view while working, the higher floors are dedicated to offices. The top floor has been turned into a cafeteria and break room where employees can relax and enjoy the view, something I take pride in. I enjoy spending time alone in my office, because it allows me to think about the many employees working in this company. Once a week, go through a company newsletter featuring photos of all employees, making an effort to remember each person's face and name. I truly cherish these moments. I received a profound apology from Steve's parents. They were genuinely nice people. It's a pity we couldn't become a real family. The debt Steve was so afraid of turned out not to be as substantial as feared, once offset against the cash Dad had on hand. Dad, who had a preference for paying in cash, apparently kept savings stashed around the house. Steve ended up shouldering a significant debt. Ultimately, the inheritance left to him was negative, but manageable if Steve worked hard enough. As for the complete halt in transactions I ordered with his company, it prompted a thorough investigation. As a result, his negligence was exposed, and he was demoted. Yet, perhaps out of spite, he continues to work at that company. It might also be his way of trying to prove something to me and my dad. Occasionally, I receive messages from Steve. Lengthy texts boasting about how hard he's struggling against adversity. I never reply, of course. As a professional, striving to meet the bare minimum is expected. The house he lives in, still registered in my name, is scheduled for cancellation at the end of the month. He will have to find a new place from scratch. But that's no concern of mine. After all, we are strangers now. I closed the company newsletter and looked out the large window. There's a hint of spring in the air. Seemingly the newsletter will feature new faces. Just the thought is exciting. With that anticipation, continue to dedicate myself to my work today. Today marks exactly 1 year since my dad passed away. Many visitors gathered at the house where my dad lived. His drinking buddies, old friends, and many from my dad's and my company came to visit. Even the friends he made during his hospital stay, who had since been discharged, came to show their healthy and spirited selves. Truly, he was loved by everyone. Somehow, it even seems like the dad in the photos is smiling. Just a little bit, right? I lightly clinked my glass against the one filled with white wine I had placed in front of my dad's photo. The clear, bell-like sound seemed like my dad's laughter. Will you marry me? As I entered the cafe during a business trip, I saw a man proposing to a woman with a bouquet of bright red roses. However, to my surprise, that man was my husband. As I blinked in disbelief, an unknown woman nodded her head with a shy smile, and my husband beamed with joy. Congratulations! When I spontaneously shouted and clapped, the other customers also joined in the excitement. At that moment, realizing my presence, my husband turned pale and froze. When I approached the woman and handed her something, she beamed with happiness. I am Cindy, 48 years old. It has been 25 years since I married Brandon. 2 years into our marriage, we had our son, Michael, but Brandon hardly ever took part in household or childcare duties. I raised Michael while working, and now, as an adult, he has moved out to start his job and has become my business partner. With just the two of us left, I had hoped to enjoy some uninterrupted time together. But Brandon's routine involves day drinking beer and playing games on his phone during his days off. He spends a lot of time alone. Why don't we go out to a movie for a change? What? Hanging out with an old wife like you is boring. I'd rather play my games, they're hundreds of times more fun. Well, how rude. Ah, I got a message. I'm going out to hang with friends. Lately, Brandon has been dressing up and leaving the house with a spring in his step, humming tunes. It feels lonely, but I thought this must be what happens as couples age together. Then, one day, after finishing some work at my business trip location, I entered a cafe to grab lunch and saw a man kneeling in front of a woman. I'll definitely make you happy. Will you marry me? He was proposing to a woman in her late 20s with a bouquet of bright red roses. Could it be? Moving closer to see who it was, I realized it was unmistakably Brandon. What is this? What's going on? I was stunned. Never expecting to witness such a scene, I thought I was dreaming. Stunned, I stood there blinking as the woman softly spoke up. If you're okay with someone like me, I'd be honored. The woman, her cheeks blushing with happiness, accepted the bouquet from Brandon, who was grinning broadly. Congratulations on your engagement. As I burst out clapping, the other customers got caught up in the excitement as well. Cheers of "what a successful proposal" and of "best wishes" filled the cafe. Looking to see Brandon's reaction, he quickly averted his eyes. I'm sweating from the nerves. Excuse me for a moment. Brandon started wiping his face with a napkin from the table, but his sweat showed no signs of stopping. Ignoring him, I handed my business card to the woman, who initially looked surprised, but then smiled warmly after a moment. Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad to be of help. Feel free to contact me anytime. Brandon, seemingly oblivious to our conversation, asked the staff for a new napkin to wipe the sweat that kept pouring out. Losing my appetite, I left the cafe and sat on a bench in a nearby park, unable to do anything but stare blankly for a while. The worst. Should I have confronted Brandon right there? As I replayed the scene in my head, I grew increasingly sad. Finally calming down a bit, I took out my phone and dialed Brandon's number. However, though the call rang, there was no sign of him picking up. Unable to leave a message as it didn't go to voicemail, I was stuck. The next day, when I returned home from my business trip, the house felt unusually empty. Fearing the worst, I opened the closet to find that only Brandon's things were gone. And on the living room table, there was a memo mentioning that he wanted a divorce and a wedding ring left behind. I don't want to divorce without even discussing why. Driven by the need to talk to Brandon, I kept calling him. Finally, he answered the phone. "Stop bothering me with your calls," he snapped. "You plan to leave after 25 years of marriage without saying anything to me? I thought you'd understand since you saw me proposing yesterday. What's your reason for leaving me and being with that woman? I'm sick of looking at an old woman with wrinkles like you. I want to enjoy a second life with a younger woman." My husband said this dismissively, with a sneer. Do men prefer younger women? I no longer understood the meaning of our 25 years together. Feeling it was futile to continue, I was about to hang up when Brandon said, "Wait a minute. The woman I proposed to yesterday is named Vanessa. She was really moved by your business card." I didn't know. "But your wedding venue is quite popular." "Yes, it's booked solid for the next 6 months." I had given Vanessa my business card in a spur-of-the-moment act of sarcasm, right in front of Brandon. I thought this might allow me to keep in touch with her in the future. But while I said, "Feel free to contact me anytime," securing a booking at the venue would still be a long way off. "So, I want to make Vanessa happy by having the wedding at the most expensive venue you have." "Excuse me? Think of it as a kind of wedding gift from me. Also, I want to keep it a surprise for Vanessa until the day of the event." What is he talking about? It's impossible to organize a wedding without informing the bride, but Brandon wouldn't listen to any of my objections. "So, I'm counting on you. And you should find someone good for yourself, too." After saying his piece, Brandon unilaterally ended the call. My mind was in turmoil from all the sudden developments, and as I listened to the disconnected tone, my heart filled with emptiness and sorrow. I couldn't bring myself to accept the divorce as time just passed by. Oblivious to my pain, Brandon kept leaving voicemails daily, asking, "Did you accept the divorce? Is the venue secured?" Hearing his insensitive remarks made me feel even more hollow, and slowly, my emptiness turned into anger. I began to wonder about the type of person the woman he chose was and started looking into it. And I could somewhat understand why Brandon chose her. I see. So that's how it is. Then, I made a decision. Just then, coincidentally, a cancellation opened up at the wedding venue Brandon desired, so I called him. "I made up my mind to accept the divorce, and I've secured your desired wedding venue in 3 months. Come to the house for the arrangements. I don't want the staff to know we're separated." "You finally decided to come around, huh? Don't you start crying on me. I'm over it, so you can relax." Relieved by my response, Brandon came to our house at dusk, seemingly in high spirits. In the living room, I served his favorite beer and told him that I accepted divorce through my lawyer, which pleased him immensely. "This is our last supper, huh?" "Well, not exactly, but I have your favorite wine here too, so have a drink." After opening the wine and seeing his good mood, I decided to ask him something that had been on my mind. "Hey. How did you meet her?" "I met Vanessa through the game I play on my phone." "Why do you ask?" "I want to find someone nice, too, like you did. I'd also like to know how you managed to charm someone 20 years younger." She was an easy target because she's not used to men. Just a little kindness, and she fell right away. "You certainly have a way with women, don't you?" Flattered by my praise, Brandon started to explain in detail about his relationship with her. They got to know each other through chatting in the game. "You know, she's actually quite a successful CEO. Just between us, I don't really find her attractive because she's not my type." So, you fell for her personality? Not that either. If she wasn't rich, I wouldn't bother with such a domineering and self-centered woman. I proposed because being with her means I won't have to work and can indulge every day. You're quite sly, aren't you? But since you managed to win her over, you really are impressive. Thanks for the enlightening story. After listening to his story, we started discussing the division of property, and he unexpectedly said, "She's rolling in money, so I don't need anything. I'll give you the house and everything else because you're the poor one." He even wrote a document to confirm it. So, the shared assets and the house are really mine, then? This is my gift to you as you embark on a lonely life alone. Be grateful. By the way, make sure you handle the wedding invitations and everything else. Surprisingly, Brandon had already brought the measurements of his fiancée and the guest list. By the way, I've told Vanessa's relatives that this is my first marriage, so none of our relatives will be invited. Okay, I got it. I'll make sure it's an unforgettable ceremony. Brandon waved happily and skipped back home. I immediately began preparations, ensuring everything was meticulously arranged. Before we knew it, 3 months had passed, and the day of the wedding arrived. When the unsuspecting bride Vanessa arrived, I informed her that this was a surprise wedding just for her, and had her dressed in a pristine white wedding gown. The venue was filled with many relatives, all in a celebratory mood. As the host, I announced with the microphone, "Now, let's welcome the bride and groom," and the wedding march began to play. Then Vanessa and the groom, dressed in a white tuxedo, slowly made their entrance into the venue. When it was time for the vows, Brandon confidently declared, "I vow to cherish you for life." However, Vanessa remained silent, her head bowed. "What's the matter, Vanessa? Are you embarrassed?" "Well, a little." While trying to coax her, Brandon kept talking, but Vanessa looked increasingly uncomfortable. Suddenly, the photographer approached and said, "Dad, don't rush her, just give her a moment." "What? Dad? Are you referring to Brandon?" That photographer was Michael, my son, who often helps me with my work. Vanessa looked shocked. "That's ridiculous. Don't say weird things. Even though you divorced Mom, did you forget about me? Anyway, congrats on the remarriage, Dad." When Michael conveyed his congratulations, the crowd in the venue began to murmur. In a panic, Brandon looked at me and signaled with his eyes as if to say, "Do something about this." Instead of saying okay, I winked at Brandon, then gave instructions to the staff. Suddenly, the lights in the venue went out, and a video of Brandon was projected on the white wall. It was conversation between me and Brandon, who came to house 3 months ago. All she does is work and play games, so it was easy to win her over. No matter how young, she's not my type because she's ugly. I wouldn't bother with such a strong-willed, self-centered woman if she wasn't wealthy. The attendees looked at each other when they heard the face and words of my ugly husband. Who was saying bad things about Vanessa when I asked him how he met her? Vanessa's cheeks twitched, and she clenched her bouquet tightly. "Stop it. Please, stop. Enough of belittling people. Vanessa, don't get it wrong. This is all fake. Someone is trying to sabotage me." His face pale, Brandon was sweating as much as when he had stumbled on me at a cafe. "Oh, I filmed it uncut myself. Did you forget what happened 3 months ago? Don't mess with me. You have no right to ruin my happiness." As Brandon tried to approach me in anger, Michael grabbed his arm to stop him. I took the microphone again and smiled at everyone in the venue. "Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the late introduction, but I am Cindy, Brandon's ex-wife. Vanessa's family thought this was his first marriage. But that was a blatant lie. He discarded me like trash after 25 years together. He really is a terrible man. I'm ashamed to have been deceived by him." Vanessa nodded in agreement, and Brandon looked bewildered. "What do you mean? You proposed to Vanessa at a cafe, right?" "Well, she also gave me her business card that day. So I was the one who contacted her about the wedding dress fitting. I gave you her measurements, didn't I? You can't possibly prepare the perfect wedding dress with just that information." So, I met with Vanessa and showed her the video. 3 months ago, she trembled with frustration, biting her lip as tears of anger welled up, and she stood up shouting, "I can't forgive Brandon. I'll confront him right now." I suggested that since she was planning revenge anyway, we should do it where he couldn't escape. What a cowardly move. You're one to talk, proposing under the guise of being single just for Vanessa's money. Damn it. You've ruined my big day. I won't let this go easily. Too bad. You might not be safe before you can get back at me. Not only Vanessa but also her relatives glared at Brandon with sharp eyes, surrounding him. Realizing he was in trouble, Brandon shook off his son's grip and began apologizing to her relatives, pale-faced. However, no one was there to defend him. "Brandon, look at me." Vanessa spoke to him, perhaps looking like a lifeline to him. "What? Are you forgiving me?" But before he could finish speaking, Vanessa slapped him hard across the face with a resounding smack. The impact was tremendous, and a bright red mark of her hand soon appeared on his cheek. Ignoring the groaning Brandon, Vanessa deeply apologized to me and the guests, saying, "Thank you for everything," and briskly walked out of the venue. I apologize for the dramatic scene. The bride has left, so today's ceremony is cancelled. Please make sure to take your gifts back home with you. Don't you dare speak out of turn. With a handprint still on his cheek, Brandon, sweating coldly, tried to lunge at me, but again, my son restrained him. Actually, when Vanessa consulted me about what to do with the wedding gifts, I suggested returning them as they were. So, we were ready to return them immediately, with my staff handling the reception. You seem to forget something important. I'll be claiming the wedding expenses from you. What? Seriously? Please pay $100,000 for the wedding expenses in full, sir. That's too much. Isn't that supposed to be your gift? Do you think I'm an empty-headed fool? My gift was just to secure the venue. Oh. My bad, sorry. I got the wedding costs wrong. Brandon looked momentarily relieved and said smugly, "I knew it. That was the price excluding tax. The accurate total is $110,000 including tax, so please make your payment by the due date." What? That's impossible. We don't offer discounts as this is from the venue. At least give me back my house. That's already sold. How about it? Wasn't it the most unforgettable ceremony ever? Ah. This is the worst. Well, everyone has left, so it's time for us to clear out. At my signal, the venue was cleaned up with astonishing speed. The only one left was Brandon, miserable in his white tuxedo. He collapsed as if his soul had left his body, rolling his eyes back. His life ahead will surely be tough. I bought a small apartment with the money from the house Brandon transferred to me and started living alone. Having my own free space made me realize how much I had been manipulated by my husband. Work is going well, I got a promotion, and I've been put in charge of a major venue. Somehow, after leaving Brandon, it feels like my luck has improved, and I'm looking forward to enjoying life to the fullest. Since I became wheelchair-bound due to an accident 2 years ago, the attitude of my husband and his mother had become overtly harsh. "Sorry, but could you get out of this house?" One night, my husband told me abruptly, and for a moment I couldn't understand what he meant. "What do you mean?" "I mean it literally. My mom and I talked it over and decided." "So, asking me to get out means you want a divorce?" "Yes, that's right. I've been thinking that for a long time. We don't need you anymore now that you're not making money." He clenched his fist and spat out the words as if he were spitting blood. "I got it. Thank you for everything. And, thank you for leaving nothing behind in the end." That's all I said, and I left my seat. They would only understand these words a bit later. My name is Emily. After graduating from college, I've been working at the current company for 10 years. All right, I'll go home now. See you tomorrow, you guys. See you tomorrow. I closed my laptop and stood up from my desk. I looked at the clock by the window and found that I had worked 2 hours of overtime. The meeting that started in the afternoon was pushed back. And I ended up spending time preparing meeting materials and responding to emails after working hours. I left the office, took the elevator down to the ground floor. Through the glass automatic doors at the building entrance, I saw that it was already dark outside. After leaving the company's main gate, I checked the train schedule on my phone while heading to the nearest station. As I walked towards the station, I saw two colleagues from the same department as my husband, Bob, also heading towards the station. I wonder if Bob has already gotten home. Recently, we stopped talking about our work at home, so I don't even know if Bob's work is busy right now. To be precise, talking about work at home started to visibly sour Bob's mood, so we naturally stopped bringing it up. On the train ride home, I gazed out the view out the window. When Bob and I were dating, we often went home together at the same time to finish work, but for the past year or two, we have been completely apart. Suddenly, a young couple standing near the door caught my eye. I overhear them, probably college students, happily chatting about the movie they saw the other night. The happy scene overlapped with memories of the past. I managed to pass the sudden surge of emotions by closing my eyes tightly and shutting out the view. "Hi, I'm home," I call out as I open the front door. As I take off my pumps, I notice from the shoes lined up in the entrance that everyone else seems to be home. In the back, the living room door opened, and the sound of flapping slippers was approaching. "Oh, hi Emily. You were late again today, weren't you?" "Hi Doris, sorry for the wait. I'll have dinner ready in a moment." "Well, there's no rush. You must be tired from working late." "No, not really. I had a meeting this afternoon that got pushed back and I'm running late, but I think I'm almost done." Cheerfully responding, I head to the living room with my mother-in-law, Doris. After getting married, Bob and I lived together, but when Bob's father was hospitalized for a health problem, we moved into his parents' house last year and have been living together as a family of 4. "Hi Emily, you had a hard day working late today." "Thank you." My father-in-law, who was reading the newspaper on the living room sofa, greeted me gently. He had suffered an acute subarachnoid hemorrhage last year and underwent emergency surgery. He was in a dangerous condition at one point, but after his discharge and going through rehabilitation, he is now able to live without any problems. He is of a gentle nature, and his friendly and approachable personality had made a good impression on me since the time I first met him before our marriage. He worked as an accounting director until his retirement, so he is well knowledgeable about financial matters. When Bob and I used to visit his home, he often gave me tips on managing household finances. Finished preparing dinner, we all gathered around the dining table. The other day, Alice came to visit us and we had lunch, and I was surprised to see how big her daughter, Rachel, has grown. "Oh yes? People say that children in other families seem to grow up faster, right?" Alice was as beautiful as ever, and I guess having a child makes us feel more feminine as a mother. "That's so nice." Alice is Doris's niece, making her Bob's cousin. Doris frequently shows her disappointment that Bob and I don't have any children. To be honest, I had a hard time with Doris because she didn't seem to be happy that I was working even after we got married, and whenever I saw her, she would imply things like, "I want you to quit a job and let me see my grandkids as soon as possible." Since we started living together, especially on days when I come home late from work, she would bring it up for any reason. "Emily, I think you would have had the option of having a child a little earlier." "Well, I guess it can't be helped because you're busy with your work." I looked at Bob with a sideways glance as I vaguely phased through the meal, and he just silently kept eating without looking at me. Bob and I were colleagues at work, and we got married in our second year of dating. He wanted me to be a stay-at-home mom if we had kids, but we have never had kids until now, 10 years into our marriage. And we both have been working full-time since the beginning of our marriage. Bob and I had dearly wanted kids, and tried everything from herbal medicine to medical examinations, but we were unable to conceive. Although I feel lonely, I have been working as hard as I can to make up for it, thinking it would be good to continue to live with just the couple. However, at some point, I started to feel an invisible barrier between Bob and me. We should have married each other willingly and walked together trying to make each other happy, but gradually, the temperature in our relationship has been different. It probably started when Bob began having troubles at work. Although Bob did not say anything to me, I had heard from a senior staff member in the same department as him that he seemed to be troubled by the fact that he was not achieving as successfully as his peers around him. Bob is calm by nature and is not a pressure taker, plus he has a habit of pushing himself too hard. Even without words, I could clearly sense his frustration and irritation. However, when I gently tried to discuss the issue with him, he stubbornly refused to share his worries, always insisting, "It's okay, and don't worry about it." Since he continued to refuse to confide in me, there was nothing more I could do, and it was frustratingly helpless not being able to support him. Still, on days off, we would go on trips or relax at home together, valuing our time as a couple. When my attempts at getting pregnant were consistently unsuccessful and I was emotionally drained, he supported me without saying anything. Even though I couldn't solve Bob's current troubles, I was going to be there for him and make time for him to feel at peace. The turning point was probably when I was offered a promotion. My performance on a project was recognized, and I was promoted faster than my peers. Isn't that great? "Congratulations, Emily," he had congratulated me, but I'll never forget his expression. With tears almost coming, all I could say was, "Thank you." As my work became busier, the distance between Bob and me only grew. Eventually, the time we spent together decreased, conversations dwindled, and by the time my income surpassed his, we hardly looked each other in the eye. As I watch Bob's back as he finishes his meal and leaves his seat without a single word of conversation, I wonder if I had been able to help him more back then by desperately trying to hang on without fear of rejection. Would we have had a different relationship than we do now? When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was the stark white light of fluorescent lamps. After blinking several times, I looked around. It appears that I am lying in a hospital bed. Looking down, I saw an AIB hooked up to my arm and both of my legs in multiple layers of bandages and casts. The moment I tried to move, I felt a pain like I've never felt before in my entire body. Ow. Tears blurred my vision due to the overwhelming pain. My body felt as heavy as lead, and I couldn't seem to move at all. What on earth had happened? I tried to recall the events leading up to the moment before I woke up. This morning, I went to work as usual, finished a meeting and a presentation, and it had been a while since I left work on time. I left the office and was heading to the station when, suddenly, I remembered. During the rush hour, which was busier than usual, I heard the shrill sound of sudden braking behind me. As I turned around, an impact surged through my body. The moment I realized I had been hit by a car, a wave of fear washed over me due to the pain throughout my body. What's happening to my body now? Footsteps approached, and suddenly, the curtains around my bed were drawn open. Oh. Emily. You're awake. Don't get up yet. A young female nurse addressed me hastily. I know you are confused, but your doctor, Dr. Williams, will explain everything to you soon. Please rest easy. Yes. The nurse then left in a hurry. A few minutes later, Dr. Williams arrived and explained the circumstances of the accident and the details of the surgery. Apparently, a truck driver who had fallen asleep at the wheel had veered onto the sidewalk and, unfortunately, hit me from behind. I had been immediately rushed to this hospital after the accident and had been in surgery, which was successfully completed about half a day ago. Well, have you contacted my family? Your husband and his parents, with whom you live, have been informed about the accident and that the surgery went well. However, they all seem to be away and cannot come right away. I see. Thank you so much. Bob was on a business trip, and his parents had been on an overseas trip since last week. From the way Dr. Williams spoke, I could somewhat imagine how they reacted when contacted. Even considering they were away, the reaction wasn't what you'd expect when being told a loved one had been in an accident. At least, it was something others might hesitate to convey directly. Imagining Bob's reaction to the news of my accident, I laughed to myself. I just couldn't connect it to a picture of him being worried about me. According to Dr. Williams's further explanation, while my life is not in danger, the damage to both of my legs is particularly severe. And the prospects of walking again are slim. I listened to the explanation about my condition as if it were about someone else. It was 3 days after the accident when Bob visited me in the hospital. I was surprised to see him look terribly pained when he saw me lying on the bed with injuries all over my body. Sorry, I'm late. Don't worry about it. Sorry for the trouble during your trip. It had been a long time since we last talked. There was an awkward atmosphere. The conversation stopped there, with both of us keeping our eyes down, and Bob just left, saying he was going to talk to Dr. Williams. I couldn't say anything and just watched him go. 2.5 years have passed since the accident. I was left with disabilities from the accident on both of my legs and was forced to live in a wheelchair. Since the accident happened while I was commuting, I was able to stay with the company, but working as before became difficult. And I retired about 6 months ago. Since retiring, I've been spending time at home, but lately, something has been bothering me. One thing is that Doris's attitude towards me has become noticeably harsher than before. Emily, can I ask you something right now? Sure, what is it? I have to go out now, so could you please fold the laundry for me? It's only folding, and someone like you can do it, right? Even if you can't move your legs at all. Yes. I'll take care of it. Good, make sure you do it right. Since I started spending my days at home, her snide remarks have increased. She doesn't like the fact that her son's wife stays home all the time instead of working, and now every time she sees me, she comes with a set of sarcasm and a request. As I folded the laundry, I sighed. Another thing that has been bothering me is Bob's work situation. According to my former colleagues, Bob is losing his place at work even more than before. The juniors and subordinates joining later overtook him in job performance. And people apparently felt they had to hang around him vigilantly at all times. After returning from work, he often holed up in his room, but lately he has been taking it out on me more often than ever. Emily, I'm jealous. You don't have to worry about workplace relationships anymore, and you don't have to work to make ends meet. I heard from my mom that you've been doing nothing all day long, just lazing around. That's so nice. I wish I could live like that for once. There is no longer any trace of the gentle personality he once had left in Bob, who continues to spit sarcasm at me in this way. I was just sad to see how Bob had changed. Sorry, but could you get out of this house? One night, my husband told me abruptly, and for a moment I couldn't understand what he meant. What do you mean? I mean it literally. My mom and I talked it over and decided. I looked at Doris, who was sitting next to Bob. Emily, since you quit your job, you've been home all the time, not paying your bills, not helping out at home, and just staying home. To be frank, it's not good for me to have you here any longer. That's unfair. Don't you think it's presumptuous to stay in someone else's house indefinitely without contributing anything? Doris continued with a triumphant look. Bob was silent without looking at me. Bob is having a hard time at work too. Just because you two are married doesn't mean he has an obligation to support you any further. I asked Bob, who was looking down. So, asking me to get out means you want a divorce? Yes, that's right. I've been thinking that for a long time. After all this time together, is there really nothing left of your feelings for me? Of course not, there is no such thing. Bob began speaking as if a dam had burst. Do you know how miserable I felt every time I saw you? You probably think I'm a fool, don't you? You thought I was inferior to you every single day. And you felt so superior to me, right? It felt as if the threads we had spun together since the time we met were being shredded one by one. I've endured you because you are bringing money into the house, but things aren't what they used to be anymore. Now you're just a useless piece of crap with no job and no money. Bob clenched his fist and spat the words out as if spitting blood. We don't need you anymore now that you're not making money. The last thread snapped with a bump. I got it. It was the first time Bob looked at me. But there is one condition. All the arrangements and procedures for the divorce will be done through a lawyer. If you can agree to that, I'll pack my things and leave within the week. Yes, that's fine. Right, Bob? Bob just nodded silently. Then, I guess we're done here, Bob. Bob flinched and looked at me. Thank you for everything. And, thank you for leaving nothing behind in the end. That's all I said, and I left my seat. It's been a few days since I left the house. When I checked my phone for incoming calls, it was from Bob. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. Yes? Emily. I'm sorry, could you please come back? What's this all of a sudden? My dad told me that you had been covering our living expenses ever since you quit your job. You had been investing since you were still working. Right? Now, you're making enough from dividends to cover our living expenses. Yes, that's right. So what? I left the household finances to you and my dad, so I didn't know anything about it. I thought my income was used to pay for our living expenses. But it was almost all covered by your income, wasn't it? I really want to apologize for the terrible things I said. I'm sorry. Since we got married and started managing our finances together, I had been using my income for investments. I was originally encouraged by my father-in-law, and I have been consulting only him about financial management and investments. And what do you expect me to do by coming back? Well, my dad says that with my income alone, we can't possibly maintain the same lifestyle as before. And I'm not confident I can continue with my current job for much longer. So, you want me to come back just to make things easier for you guys? How dare you say something like that with such ease? I could see Bob catch his breath over the phone. I never said anything before because I believed that somewhere you still cared about me, even if it wasn't the same as before. But now, you're not the Bob I used to love. That's not true. I still care about you, Emily. There's no need to say any more. After our last conversation, all my feelings for you disappeared. I'm sorry. But however you and your family end up, I really don't care anymore. Thank you for truly leaving nothing behind, no trust, no memories. Wait, Emily. Please, forgive me. The divorce arrangements and proceedings will be handled entirely through a lawyer. Don't contact me again. I hung up the phone after that and refused all further communication. Afterwards, the divorce proceedings moved quickly, and I completely cut off my ties with Bob. I still keep in contact only with my father-in-law. So, you haven't had any trouble with living expenses since you left Bob? No, not at all so far. I'm glad to hear that. Emily, I'm sorry to have caused you so much trouble. When Bob and Doris told me about it later, I couldn't help but yell at them for what they had done. And the way they have treated you over the years, as a family. I should never have overlooked it. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything. Oh no. Please don't worry about it. It is my apologies for the inconvenience to you as well. After I left, it seems there was constant trouble at home. Even without my income. Bob and Doris continued their lavish spending and eventually took out loans against their property because they couldn't reduce their standard of living. Fed up with his wife and son who showed no sign of changing their ways, he recently divorced as well. This has been a good opportunity to rethink my life from now on. I can live comfortably with what I have now. And I'm looking forward to trying new things. Then I smiled brightly. I'm really glad our baby was born safe and sound. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything. That's all right. Just having you here, Derek, is enough for me. Let's get together and win happiness. Those words made me feel sick to my stomach. But I couldn't just leave like that. I finally reached for the door. After a light knock, I opened it. Hey, who do you think the father of this baby is? As I entered the hospital room, I responded to Jessica's words and looked up. Oh, well, who's that? Is it someone we know? Samantha, we have no idea, right? Derek interrupted our conversation in a panic at those words. Jessica's pompous attitude for no reason and Derek's flustered attitude all seem ridiculous, and I scoffed. Of course, I know. Congratulations. I wish you all the best. Make sure you two make that baby happy. Then I left Derek behind and walked out of the hospital room. The two will surely get what they deserve. There is no future for them to be happy as it is, after making people unhappy. I was headed to some place to prepare a new future for them. My name is Samantha. I'm a 37-year-old housewife. Born and raised in a rural area. I have one younger sister. I grew up happily as the eldest daughter of an ordinary family. After high school, I worked as an office clerk at a local company. There was nothing flashy about it, but I enjoyed my days earnestly. That's when I was introduced to my husband, Derek, through work. Derek was the son of the president of our client company, Mr. Parker. He was 3 years older than me, and seemed almost too good for me. Chris, the executive director who introduced Derek to me, said to Mr. Parker, Derek's father, Samantha is very diligent and precise in her work. She has a good reputation for being kind to our clients. If Chris, who seldom praises anyone, says so, she must be a wonderful young lady. My father-in-law, John, liked me from the first time we met. Derek also took a liking to me, and we started dating, leading to our marriage when I was 33. I quit my job and became a housewife. Everyone celebrated our union. However, there was one person who felt differently. That was my sister, Jessica. Jessica, 10 years younger than me. My much younger sister was the long-awaited second child born after my mother, Sue, underwent fertility treatments. Because of this, she was very much doted on and spoiled by the family. Of course, I also adored Jessica very much. I want to eat custard pudding. But this is your sister's. You had some yesterday, didn't you, Jessica? It's okay, I'm good. Let her have it. In this way, I often indulged her little whims since we were young. As a result, Jessica developed a personality quite the opposite of mine. She became good at being pampered. For better or worse, she grew up to be someone who always expressed her opinions clearly. I don't want to wear your hand-me-downs. They're ugly and I don't want to wear them. When she was in elementary school, she rejected my hand-me-down clothes, troubling our mother. Though we were a normal family, we were not particularly wealthy. I too wore mostly hand-me-downs, but I never complained, even if I didn't like them. It's not that I think Jessica shouldn't complain just because I didn't, but I do think it's important to learn to endure. It's not ugly. Sure, it's a bit dated, but it's still perfectly wearable. If I talked back even a little, she would even get sassy and say, "You don't even notice how lame your clothes are because you're a lame sister." Admittedly, I may not have been the most fashionable person. But I took good care of the new clothes I was occasionally bought and my mother kept them clean. Since I didn't care much for flashy things, my wardrobe consisted solely of basic items from versatile brands. I thought they were perfectly fine for Jessica to wear. But it must have been the mere fact that they were hand-me-downs that she disliked. Still, we were blood sisters. Unknowingly, our tastes were similar, and the clothes my parents would buy for Jessica were all the same ones I had, in the same colors. But still, my parents and I spoiled Jessica because we cared too much about her. Jessica's selfishness became even worse when she was in high school. Asking for pocket money and buying cosmetics, bags, or anything else she wants right away without holding back. If she didn't feel like going to school, she'd skip. If she wanted to go out, she'd head out even in the middle of the night. By this time, instead of just spoiling her, our parents scolded Jessica many times for such outrageous behavior. Searching for Jessica late at night wasn't a rare occurrence for our family. Even when my parents refused to give her money, she would sneak off to our grandparents' house, who knew nothing about it, and secretly begging for pocket money. No amount of preaching or restricting her behavior would change Jessica's mind, who had been unrestrained since childhood. I spoiled Jessica too much. What if she gets dropped out of school for slacking off like that? Though our mother seemed to feel responsible for Jessica's behavior, Jessica managed to graduate from high school without further incident. And then, she managed to find a job. The whole family was relieved, but shockingly, she quit after just 1 month. I was astonished that she would say something like, "There's a stinky old man here," which wasn't even a reason to leave the company. Afterward, she flitted between being a part-time worker and quitting, reaching the age of 23. Now an adult, neither our parents nor I would say much to Jessica anymore. Even though she's been a part-time worker, she has been working steadily without quitting for the past 2 years. Becoming an adult seems to have taught her a bit about personal responsibility, and she appears to have settled down somewhat. However, when I got married, she wanted to quit her job too. "I'm too jealous that you marry the son of the president of the company and become a full-time homemaker." That was Jessica's first words when I told her I was getting married. Even though I'm a homemaker, I still have to do housework, and I'm willing to do simple company duties at home without pay. Even when I tell her that, she seems to be envious of the very idea of quitting a job. House chores can be done quickly, and business tasks are just a few minutes' work, right? Even so, I can't cut corners. Right. Besides, it must be hard to keep up with relatives when her father-in-law is the president of the company, isn't it? I don't think she'll ever feel at ease. Our mother supported me, but it was hard for Jessica to accept. This is just something to hold on to until your in-laws are dead. Your father-in-law is old, and in a few years, you'll be the wife of the company president, right? What the heck are you talking about? I was deeply upset by Jessica's remarks. It seemed that Jessica could tell I was upset, as she laughed heartily and said, "I'm just joking." But I wasn't in the mood to laugh, and our parents were simply dumbfounded by her remark. Despite everyone thinking Jessica's joke was too much, she actually quit her job shortly after. I quit my job, so I'll start doing the household chores tomorrow. I'm going to be a homemaker. She never even helped our mother before, and now we are all swept away by her sudden statement. I would get married and leave home in a few months, but I felt sorry for our parents who would have to continue to live with such Jessica. I can't believe she actually quit her job. When I sighed, my parents just gave a wry smile. We thought she had calmed down, but it seems Jessica is still just a child. Even though it's okay now, what is she planning to do in the future if she doesn't settle into a stable job? Even though it's her responsibility, the parents surely worry about her. Well, let's just hope Jessica doesn't cause any trouble for Samantha. Right. You need to find happiness without being swayed by Jessica. In the end, I was married and left home, unable to do anything about Jessica, who insisted that she was a homemaker. Because that's how my marriage started, I was still concerned about my parents' home after marriage. My parents-in-law were kind to me and there was no inconvenience in my life, but as I had expected, being a homemaker is hard work. Besides the housework and work I had expected, it is dizzying to have to deal with relatives and prepare gifts for company relations. Even though we lived separately, my mother-in-law, Linda, would often visit our house to teach me various tasks, saying, "It must be tough being married into such a family," showing concern for me. No, I understand because I went through it too. But let's take things easy and not overdo it. If you try too hard, you'll stress yourself out. Linda said this with a smile, teaching me various things. There are a lot of things that are hard for a housewife to deal with, such as dealing with her in-laws. Some friends commented on how tough it looked, but Linda always cared for me and would even prepare meals while I was busy learning the ropes. I was deeply touched by how wonderful my in-laws were. My parents are really happy that you became my wife. Derek also said so. Gradually, I became more integrated into his family as a daughter-in-law. 2 years after our marriage, I was blessed with our long-awaited first child. My in-laws were overjoyed. Derek seemed excited about the arrival of our child too. However, contrary to this happiness, I had a concern. It was about Derek's suspicious behavior. Lately, he had been taking his phone to the bathroom and having a lot of business dinners, which reduced the time he spent with me. As he was spending less and less time at home, I was worried that he was getting tired and said to him, "You look busy these days. I'm about to be president. It's hard with all the calls and appointments." However, Derek quickly returned his attention to his phone after giving a predictable reply. Since becoming pregnant, I had slowly become anxious about Derek not spending time with me. One day, however, I suddenly wondered if Derek was having an affair. It happened when I glanced at Derek, who was looking at his phone as usual. His face was far too giddy for what was supposed to be a work-related message. That expression unsettled me. Oh, something came up suddenly. "I'm heading out." Sure enough, immediately after making that face, Derek spoke to me. "What? Right now? President Bennett is always in a hurry. Have a good night's sleep and don't worry about me." Then, Derek rushed out of the house. I found it unbelievable. What kind of emergency could there be at this hour of the night? I woke up to my husband leaving his pregnant wife alone in the middle of the night and going out. For the sake of my unborn child, I decided it was time for Derek to face reality, so I finally hired a private detective. Sometime after that, I received a call from my parents. Jessica has been taken to the hospital. Please come as soon as possible. I was shocked by the news. Since she was taken to the gynecology department, I thought perhaps she had suffered an ovarian torsion and hurried to the hospital. Is Jessica's examination over? Is she okay? Upon meeting up with my parents in the waiting room at the hospital, I asked them. It turns out she was pregnant, and she started labor. What? I exclaim out loud at my mother's words. Didn't you ever notice that before? Jessica had been going for checkups, but she didn't tell us anything about it. I didn't show much of a belly when I was pregnant, and Jessica didn't show much either, so I didn't even notice. I instinctively touched my own belly. Indeed, I'm not the type whose belly stands out much either. However, I wonder if it's really possible for people not to notice someone is full-term pregnant. It's too late to say anything about it now, though. After a while, I could hear the healthy cries of a newborn. My relief was short-lived, as now a different problem presented itself. It was about how to raise this child. Jessica, a self-proclaimed housewife who is single with no job. We don't even know who the father is. However, no one could say such a thing to Jessica, who had just given birth, so we went home that day after seeing the face of the newborn baby. Jessica had a baby. I told Derek when I got home that day. Really? Wow, Jessica's a mom now. Derek said, surprised, but he smiled happily. Can I visit her too? Why don't we go together this weekend? I only got a quick look at the baby today, so I plan to visit properly. That sounds great. I'll try to rearrange my work. Derek said and immediately started fiddling with his phone. All that talk about rearranging work is just lies. But I'm hoping he'll see Jessica's baby and be changed. And then, on the weekend, Derek and I headed to the hospital where Jessica was admitted. Just as we were about to enter the hospital, my phone rang. It was from that detective agency. It wasn't good to answer the phone while Derek was with me. Hesitating for a moment, Derek spoke up. Phone call? Is it okay if I go ahead? He seemed excited to see the baby, and I was relieved. Thanks, I think this call will be quick, so I'll be right there. I said, parting ways with Derek, and answered the phone. The call ended and I headed to the hospital room in a depressed mood. Just then, I heard voices coming from inside. I'm really glad our baby was born safe and sound. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything. That's all right. Just having you here, Derek, is enough for me. Let's get together and win happiness. With the phone call I just got, those words made me feel sick to my stomach. But I couldn't just leave like that. Finally, I reached out, knocked lightly, and opened the door. How are you feeling, Jessica? Samantha. Glad you're here. Of course. Derek was holding the baby, looking very happy. Sorry I gave birth first. How healthy and adorable is she? I wonder what your baby will be like. Oh, yes. Jessica seemed to want to be on top of me. I was also annoyed at the way she said it, but I responded shortly so as not to be provoked. Then, perhaps offended that I was not upset, Jessica intensified her words and said, Hey, who do you think the father of this baby is? I reacted to her words and looked up. Oh, well, who's that? Is it someone we know? Samantha, we have no idea, right? Derek interrupted our conversation in a panic at those words. Jessica's pompous attitude for no reason and Derek's flustered attitude all seem ridiculous, and I scoffed. Of course, I know. Congratulations. I wish you all the best. Make sure you two make that baby happy. Samantha. Well, I'm off then. Are you going to leave now? Oh, wait for me. Derek tried to chase after me in a panic, leaving the baby on the bed, but Jessica stopped him. So, you knew all along. That makes things easier. Good for you, Derek. Well, Derek was frozen, gripped by Jessica's hand on his clothing. Leaving him behind, I walked out of the hospital room. I then headed straight to the office of the detective agency, The earlier call was to inform me that they had gathered all the evidence. The detective reluctantly added, "In fact, we had observed your husband making his accustomed and familiar visits with the woman to an obstetrics and gynecology clinic located about a 10-minute drive west of your home." It was indeed an obstetrics and gynecology clinic affiliated with the hospital where Jessica gave birth. Though it was shocking, considering how Jessica had always coveted what was mine, it was entirely plausible. The conversation I had overheard only confirmed my suspicions. There was no doubt that Derek had been having an affair with Jessica. After receiving the evidence from the detective, I went straight to Derek's parents' house. "Derek's baby is born." "Baby's born? What do you mean? You haven't even given birth yet?" They were puzzled by my words. "Yes, the baby was born, but it's not my child. Please take a look at this." I presented the evidence I had received from the detective. As they read it doubtfully, their faces quickly turned pale. After finding out everything, they were profusely apologetic to me. "We never imagined something like this could happen." Linda apologized deeply, in tears. "Please don't apologize. I don't want you two to apologize to me. But I can't forgive Derek. I think I'll be seeking a divorce." "I get it. He made a wonderful wife like you unhappy, and really, we, as parents, cannot forgive our son. We are so sorry for you. We will do whatever we can to help." "Thank you." I felt from the bottom of my heart that I was lucky that my parents-in-law were the ones who understood me properly. The divorce seemed likely to proceed smoothly. After our conversation ended, their anger turned towards Derek. "Really, what is Derek thinking? I'm going to call him right now." As soon as he said that, John started calling Derek. The moment the call was connected, John yelled loudly, "I've heard everything from Samantha. What's this all about? Come here and explain. You've got it all wrong, please listen to me." Derek sounded desperate on the phone. The voice leaking out of the phone is so pathetic that I chuckle, but my parents-in-law do not smile. "All right. We'll listen to everything you have to say, so get your ass over here." "I'm sorry. I'll be right there." His voice was almost tearful, like a scolded child. Imagining his demeanor, I smirked quietly. Not wanting to face Derek, I went home afterwards. I immediately started packing. This house was a wedding gift from John. And Linda had furnished it for me. Though I was divorcing and moving out, I didn't want Jessica to take away the gifts from my in-laws. Upon expressing my feelings, my in-laws said, "Of course. We gave you that house and furniture because it was for you, Samantha. But I understand if you don't want to live there. We have a condo closer to the station, you should move there for now." "Thank you." Then, my in-laws quickly arranged for a new place and movers for me, and I moved out right away. Derek seems to be grounded at his parents' house, not even allowed to go to work. Linda keeps me updated on his situation. About a week later, I finally received a call from Derek. "Samantha. I finally managed to call. Mom took away my phone." "What do you mean you want a divorce?" "I mean it as it is. How can I stay married when you have a baby with another woman? It was just a fling with Jessica. I never expected her to get pregnant. Anyway, I'm on my way home now, let's talk this through. Don't go out. Stay there." Derek hung up in a panic, but I couldn't help but laugh. I had already moved out. Where exactly was he heading? Sure enough, a few minutes later, Derek called again. "What do you mean there's no house?" I answered, laughing at his foolish voice. "The house has been sold. The new owner plans to turn it into a parking lot. You can't just do that. That house is under my dad's name. Of course, I got permission from him. The day you came back, I disposed of your things as well. So you don't have a home anymore. Just go back to your parents' house." After my moving out, John had sold the house. I was grateful to John for going that far. And as I told Derek, the new owner was indeed planning to turn the site into a parking lot. The house had been demolished a few days before. I even went to watch it. I thought it would make me a little sad, but I was refreshed by the house breaking with a loud bang. Oh no. We can't really go back. Is he standing on the now empty lot? Derek raises a desperate, weak voice. He's really wayward, even though I've told him from the start there's no way we could go back. If he regretted it so much, he shouldn't have cheated in the first place. You're being persistent. Think about what you've done at your parents' house. He must have come here to escape from the painful reprimands from his parents, but Derek no longer has a place where he can feel at ease. He brought this on himself. That night, I received a call from my parents as well. Jessica keeps saying Derek is the baby's father. It must be some mistake, right? It seems Jessica had been saying this since leaving the hospital, but my parents had been ignoring it, unable to believe it. After a few days of her consistent claims, even my mother began to doubt and decided to contact me. I'm sorry I made you ask such a tough question. Jessica's story is true. I'm already divorcing Derek. I can't believe it. I've already informed Derek's parents and they've prepared a new place for me. I'm starting the divorce discussions. My mother sounded like she was crying on the other end of the phone. Even I burst into tears as my mother repeated, I'm so sorry for what Jessica did. She had nothing to apologize for, yet she felt responsible for Jessica's actions. Despite being an adult, Jessica probably couldn't imagine how her actions hurt others around her. Mom, don't worry about anything. I reassured my parents and ended the call. And under the supervision of my in-laws, the divorce discussions began. It's my fault. I fell for Jessica's temptations. Derek seemed not to want a divorce, repeatedly apologizing, but his words didn't resonate with me. If you feel so bad, why don't you marry Jessica? No way. Since the child has been born, Jessica can't raise her baby alone. You need to take responsibility for them. At my words, Derek fell silent, unable to respond. John sighed deeply. Samantha, we will also support you and the newborn. Derek, you must take responsibility and fulfill your duties to her sister and the baby. Faced with pressure from me and his father, Derek reluctantly accepted the divorce. I hope he reflects on his actions and lives a better life from now on. After our divorce, Derek remarried Jessica and started living with his parents. They lost their house and had no choice but to move in together. By that time, I was nearly due, but I was living comfortably in the house prepared by my in-laws. Sorry for taking Derek away. Jessica sent me that message, but I ignored it. Dealing with Jessica now could only cause me stress, which I couldn't afford. But that was probably what she wanted. I wonder what your baby will be like. They're cousins and also siblings. It's hilarious, isn't it? Well, I'm younger and more beautiful, so I'm sure my baby will be better than yours. She kept sending messages like that, completely disregarding anyone else's feelings. Hey. I haven't received a baby shower gift from you yet? She even had the audacity to demand a gift from me now that I was set to be a single mother. Are you home? I'll come over and give it to you soon. I kept ignoring her for a long time, but I replied so to the message begging for a baby shower gift and immediately headed to their house. Samantha. How are you feeling? Linda had continued to care for me even after the divorce and treated me very well. On this day, she welcomed me into their home as soon as I arrived. Is Jessica here? Derek is off today too, so she's probably around. Linda hesitated slightly, showing her concern for me. I smiled warmly and said, Great. I brought a baby shower gift for Jessica and Derek. Upon entering, I sat in the living room while Linda called for Jessica. Jessica, holding the baby and looking happy. Unaware of the impending downfall, she looked at me and laughed mockingly, as if to belittle me. So you finally brought the baby shower gift? Well, it's not like I'm short on money. I handed Jessica a large envelope. It was thick. Jessica frowned suspiciously at the envelope, which was clearly too big to contain just cash. What's this? I wasn't planning on giving it, but this is my gift to you. Jessica cautiously handed the baby to Derek and took the envelope, looking inside. Jessica's face is turning pale as she looks at several sheets of paper. What is this? What does this mean? She then shouted angrily at Derek, glaring at him. Derek, puzzled, peeked at the documents Jessica was holding. And his face turned pale. I don't know. It wasn't me. It's obviously you, Derek. I smirked at their exchange. The envelope actually contained investigative reports from a detective. I had already shown them to my in-laws, but they contained shocking facts unknown to Jessica. It revealed that Jessica was not Derek's only affair partner. He had a total of 4 affairs. Jessica was the third of them. The first one seemed to be the married woman and was the wife of a subordinate in his company. This was the woman Derek was really into. According to Linda, her husband eventually found out, and it was only after marrying Jessica that Derek finally broke it off. The second one was a 20-year-old girl he met through a dating app. Surprisingly, it wasn't Jessica but this girl who was seen entering the obstetrics and gynecology clinic with him. The detective found out that it was apparently a hospital visit for an abortion. The third one was Jessica. The last one was Jessica's friend, whom she had introduced to Derek. Of course I knew all about it, but now Derek is a complete stranger. Having any affair was bad enough, but having my sister involved made it unforgivable. That alone was enough for me never to forgive Derek. I had planned to shroud this in the darkness as long as Jessica was properly remorseful and apologetic. But since Jessica would not stop being on top of me by any means, I decided to push her off top of that mountaintop. How terrible. You liar. As expected, Jessica broke down crying in hysteria. Despite holding her sweet baby, she repeatedly hurled insults at Derek and physically lashed out at him. What's all this noise? At that moment, John came home. Seeing me, he seemed pleased and greeted me with, "Samantha. You were here?" Then he glared at Jessica and Derek. "What are you doing yelling in front of the baby? Please listen to me, Derek has." "Oh my, they know everything Derek did, you know?" I laughed at Jessica who was freaking out. "Oh, you mean?" John said, exasperated. "After all, it happened before you married Jessica, and you're no different, having abetted infidelity. Do you even have the right to blame Derek? I think only Samantha has the right to blame him." Jessica bit her lip in frustration, knowing her in-laws were not on her side. "Also, I've arranged a new home for the 3 of you to live in." "Really?" Despite her fury, Jessica's eyes lit up at John's words. "I've negotiated to get the rent down to $800 a month. I got a $30 discount because the apartment is owned by a friend of mine's company. Now, get the hell out of here." But the moment Derek heard those words, he looked despairing again. "Wait. Move out? What do you mean? And why does Samantha get a new house while we get a rental with rent to pay? I've also arranged a new job for you. It's a sales position at the real estate company." "A new job? Are you kicking me out of the company where I'm supposed to be the next president?" The two of them confronted John. However, John said with a smile, "When did I ever say you were going to be the next president? You just assumed that on your own. Besides, I can't keep someone in the company who messes around with an employee's family." "Pack your bags and leave," he said. The two who had been arguing before were now united, continuing to protest against John. I was dumbfounded as I watched, but Linda muttered beside me, "It seems like John had been planning to kick Derek out since you divorced. Both we really thought of you as a true member of our family." I was more than happy to hear that. And I laughed heartily at the heavenly punishment my sister and her husband received for losing their home, their jobs, and their trust. They moved into the house John had arranged, starting a new life. It was a 15-minute walk from the station, but perfectly located next to a pediatrician and just a 3-minute walk from a supermarket, ideal for raising a child. According to my parents, Jessica complained about not being able to go out much, but given her tendencies, more distractions would likely lead to more spending. I hope they would do their best raising their child in the home John found for his grandchild. Totally whipped by Jessica, Derek feels out of place while working as a salesperson for the real estate company. Interestingly, this company seems to be run by the family of the subordinate Derek had an affair with. I don't know if the company is aware of Derek's deeds, but I'm sure he must feel uncomfortable at work. Moreover, with her husband's income significantly reduced, Jessica will not be able to live the elegant life she had hoped for. It's a life neither Jessica nor Derek had ever imagined, but it's the situation they've brought upon themselves. No matter what happens, I hope they just make their child happy. Afterwards, I gave birth to a healthy boy. Both my in-laws and my parents adore him. Although the family ties with my in-laws have been severed, I still live in that apartment, maintaining contact with them. My job is remote work for John's company, which I have been doing without pay. Now, as a paid employee, I earn enough to raise my child on my own. I may have been plain, but I've always valued people and acted with integrity. I believe that this is the result of that. I didn't have a good husband, but I was blessed with a very adorable son. I am truly grateful for the opportunity to work from home while raising my child.